Let's start with the basics. You want your jump attack to connect with the opponent on hit or block, which means really high frame advantage, which means mix-ups on block or even combos on hit. But you cannot block during your jump, which gives the opponent ample opportunity to hit you. Most characters, when they jump, are locked into that trajectory, and most characters have plenty of moves that hit at a good angle to hit you out of the air, which makes anti-air fairly consistent. Except this is third strike, so the opponent can parry. Parries make anti-air less of a reaction time test and more of an actual mix-up, and this results in a much different anti-air style than any other fighting game. Before we get into this, be sure to watch Bafael's video. He does a great job at explaining anti-air and shows a plethora of examples. Now let me start by saying that jumping in is still a pretty bad idea. Saying that having air parries destroys the anti-air game is pretty stupid. That's like saying the game would be better without throws, so you never use throws, and then you yell at people when they throw you. If you just try to ignore the anti-air game in third strike by just blocking everything, you're going to be at disadvantage all the time. So let me state 4 things that are absolute facts. 1. Air parries exist, and they make the anti-air game more complicated, not completely null. In Street Fighter 4 and 5, you can just do the same anti-air every time, and it's just a single player reaction time test. But in third strike, you have to mix things up, which gives both players more to think about. Number 2, if you never attempt to anti-air, the jumper will get advantage because he can do a jump attack. Likewise, number 3, if you always attempt the same anti-air, the jumper has advantage since he can parry it. But, most importantly, number 4, the jumper is at disadvantage overall if you vary your anti-air parry ability, which is what this video is about. What this all means is that a predictable player will be at disadvantage at all times, even if they have consistent execution, because the opponent can just jump at them. You need more than consistent execution to play fighting games, and this is especially true in third strike. So I've already mentioned the 2 basic things that the jump-in can do. They can do a jump-in attack, or they can try to parry the anti-air. And no matter what happens, they can't do both. You cannot parry while attacking, even in the air. The one on the ground definitely has the advantage in the fact that they have the basic fallback of blocking when the jumper does not. In fact, if you don't want to deal with the anti-air game, the safest thing that you can do is to block and then tech a throw as they land. If they do a jump attack, you'll just block it, and if they don't do a jump attack, you'll throw them as they land. Now, third strike does have trip guard, which is to say that whenever you jump and land, there is a brief period of time upon landing where you cannot block, but that only occurs if they did a jump attack. This means that they can tech that throw upon landing, but you're not losing anything from trying it. In fact, going for throws in third strike is, in general, extremely safe. Low reward, but safe. It is beatable, but requires pretty specific reads that lose to basically everything else. So the basic fallback that you can do is block and then throw as they land. But there's actually a better version of this, which is high parry into SGGK, which stands for Super Goal Gatekeeping or something like that. The term comes from soccer, and it looks a little something like this, where if they do the jump attack, you get a normal anti-air, and if they empty jump, you get a throw. And depending on the character, you can get a lot of damage off of the anti-air. The only major downside here is that now you have to hit a 5-frame anti-air parry window. And you also need to watch out for delayed jump attacks and jump attacks that hit multiple times, which can mess up your parry. But let's say you're not Oro, and you have a high damage anti-air combo, but you can't get it with an SGGK, such as with Ken. Ken's best SGGK is a heavy normal, but I want to go for a high damage anti-air combo. In this case, we can revert back to a typical anti-air. Now, they might parry this, but it's not necessarily a 50-50, because you can vary the parryability of your anti-air. A very basic example with Ken is his light uppercut hits once, the medium one hits twice, the heavy hits 3 times, and the EX version can hit 3 or 4 times. Now, technically, the opponent can just react to which uppercut you do, but if you cancel into it, there's no way for them to react to that. So he can mix up between his uppercuts and whether or not he cancels into them from a normal, which all can throw a wrench into how the opponent has to parry. Of course, he can also just do a single normal attack and then not cancel it, which can really throw off the opponent if they're expecting him to cancel it. Every character has some sort of mix-up here, so let's start to get more specific. Firstly, default to SGGK for safety against mostly everything that the opponent can do. Even if you do this every time, you will rarely find yourself at disadvantage. Worst case scenario, you usually get throw teched. So if you really hate air parries, you can do this every single time, but know that you're potentially giving up a lot of damage from your other anti-air options. Now, some characters can make this pretty tricky by delaying their jump attack or attacking multiple times. In cases where you have no read at all and really don't want to get hit, then you can just fall back on blocking. Number 2, if you have a read that they will go for their jump attack, then you can anti-air normally with whatever you think will give you the highest damage. But you should still mix this up just in case you get parried. If the opponent is successfully able to parry you, then you're going to eat a full jump-in combo. Knowledge is key here. Usually, the more damage you plan to deal, the easier it is for them to parry, and thus the more risk it entails. Try everything. Try early air to air. Although keep in mind that if they parry this, suddenly you're the one being anti-aired. Vary the number of hits in your anti-air. You have raw special. You have target combos. You have normals canceled into specials, canceled into supers. You have rapid chain jabs. Another option is to walk backwards. And trip guard. This is another very safe option, but it only works at far ranges when it's possible to walk out of range of their jump attack. You could also walk under them and force them to parry backwards. And this one only works at closer ranges. So take all those options and pick the ones that you believe are the most likely to net you the greatest reward based on what you think your opponent is capable of doing. And lastly, if you think they're going to attempt an air parry, varying up your anti-air is usually enough for most characters, but some struggle to do this. In these cases, don't forget about your fallback of SGGK, but also don't forget about mashing light punch. If they end up parrying or getting hit by your light punch, the mix-up's already over. There's nothing that they can do to escape except to get hit by a light punch and get air reset. The only downside here is that jabs are not good anti-airs if the opponent does a jump attack. So only do this if you know they're going to go for a parry. But if it does work, keep in mind that supers will combo after air resets in this game. Now they can parry these air reset supers, but most of the time they don't want to. If you would like to see more about why they would not want to, then just wait for my video about juggles. Characters with air throws have a built-in mix-up here, because air throws cannot be parried. However, even characters that don't have air throws can tech air throws. So, as the one jumping, you have several things to consider. And the very first thing that you should be thinking before you jump is, why am I jumping in the first place? Do I have a read on how the opponent will try to anti-air me? Do I think he'll throw a fireball and I can go over it? In a game like Third Strike, where fireballs aren't very good and there's no reason to throw them in the first place. Do I lack confidence in my ground game, forcing me into the air? Am I playing a character with good air options, like Aura with a double jump, or the Twins with a dive kick? Either way, when you go for the jump, you have to consider all the options available to the opponent when they anti-air you. If they did whip something big like a fireball, then go for the typical jump-in combo. Otherwise, you'll need to make a read on how they're going to anti-air you. Firstly, if they go for the anti-air, you have to parry it, because you cannot block well in the air. If you do not parry their anti-air attempt, you will get hit by it. If they do go for a special cancelable normal, you have to guess about whether they will cancel that normal or not. If they cancel and you're expecting it and you parry as if they would cancel, then you get your punish. But if they don't cancel, then you might land without getting a chance to punish them because you were expecting to parry more hits. Likewise, if you expect them to not cancel, you can go for the single parry and then come down with a jump attack. But if you do that and they do cancel, you're going to end up getting hit by the move that they canceled into. Their second option is to not go for an anti-air attack and instead try to parry your jump attack. Unlike before, you really don't have a lot of variance here. If you have a multi-hitting jump attack, you can try that. Or if you have a delayed jump attack, you can try that. Or if you have a surprise cross-up jump attack, you can try that as well. Otherwise, your only real solution is to jump in, but then not attack. Now, if you do this, you may as well attempt a jump-in parry, but if you both go for the parry, then you're going to end up point-blank range with a mix-up on your hands. 90% of the time when this happens, both players will attempt to throw each other. So one very common jump-in tactic is jump-in, parry, throw. Untechable command grabs are extremely potent here. These are one of the few things that straight up beats the SGGK option select. You even see some Chun-li players forgo Super 2 in the Hugo matchup, just to make sure they have a good enough anti-air to keep Hugo out. Even if the super sucks. Number 3, if they're far away and you think they're going to walk back and try to trip guard you, you can't air attack on the way down, because that would open you up to trip guard. And if you wanted to punish them, you have to parry them, in which case you have to guess between low parry or high parry. That's quite the elaborate read. This loses to basically everything that isn't walk back into trip guard. As you can see, it straight up loses to SGGK. Number 4 is the early air-to-air. If they go for the early air-to-air, you have to air parry early. And on successful parry, suddenly the situation is turned around and now you're the one anti-airing them. But keep in mind that going for an early air parry in a jump prevents you from going for a normal air parry timing, which opens you up to all of their other anti-air options. And finally, if they cross under you, you have to parry the other direction. And that just about does it for the general anti-air mix-up of Third Strike. It's pretty obvious that the jumper is at disadvantage overall. And if there's one thing that you should take away from this video, it is that you cannot anti-air the same way every time, and you cannot jump in with the same things every time.